Let's make it count.
I must practice tolerance.
GSL Season 1 Regeneration Mountain Dew GSL Season 1 Regeneration
Welcome to the GSL Code S. I'm Artosis, joined today by not tasteless. I'm tastelessless.
You're tastelessless.
Yes.
Yes. No, it's actually really good to be back for my, I think, first GSL of 2019. It's been a while. I was with Tasteless last night when he was diagnosed with a fatal case of being a Protoss player, which normally can reduce your IQ by up to like 200 points, but doctor said he's going to make a full recovery. So happy to be here in the meantime for what actually could be one of the best groups of GSL yet. And I know it's hard after that Scarlet Hero series that I want to watch 200 times in a row, but it still could be just as amazing.
Yeah, when I originally looked at the brackets, this was my favorite group for sure. So I'm very, very excited about today. I think it's going to be out of control, so much fun. These players are, each and every one is really good, and a bunch of them are underrated.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at those players. So am I right or am I right? I mean,
you're
look
so
at this
right,
group.
Artosis.
This group is silly. It's a silly group because these players are too strong. Okay, first off, Impact, always underrated. Everyone who thinks Impact is bad, no, you're bad. You are bad. He's really unbelievably strong, and yes, in control. He uses an aggressive Zerg style. I don't care. He's really a strong player. He has potential in any group to make it out. Of course, Leenock. I was shoving Leenock down everyone's throat last season.
And right you were to do that, because if he hadn't been critically ill, undergoing surgery, checking himself out of the hospital to play in GSL last season, he absolutely could have lived up to the hype.
Well, we'll see if he can get his revenge against this man that's heading the group up, TY. Always one of the strongest Terrans in the world. I think that for a very long time, you have to have kept him as a top 2 Terran in the world. I think that's still the case. Come at me, Innovation fans. I don't even care. TY's the guy.
Yeah, and you know, we've kind of transcended the era of the 4 horsemen of Terran, and so it's really, you know, kind of a throne that the remaining Terran players have to kind of fight over. And I mean, sure, Maru kind of looks heads and tails above everybody else, but TY just absolutely so brilliant. I think he won his first tournament in StarCraft 2 when he was 8 years old. And I'm just like, I've never been 8 years old. That's too far away for history to have recorded, Artosis. Ever since I turned another year older at my birthday a couple of days ago, I'm now just like so ancient. So watching young players, and actually FanTaSy was a relatively young player when he started playing a long time ago. But
of course.
If your head says any player, your heart has to say FanTaSy. One of the sickest players to ever play the game.
Yeah, he hasn't had the greatest results in StarCraft 2 thus far.
Right.
But for those of you who might just be StarCraft 2 fans and not really realize who he is, he was the second greatest Terran player at the peak of Brood War before StarCraft 2 came out, and it went into its decline. Of course, Brood War is back, and it's big again. In fact, it's so big in Korea. This is the only guy that came out of the Army and went to StarCraft 2 as opposed to StarCraft 1. That was already a good StarCraft 1 pro. So very cool to have him here. And he's in great form right now.
So shocking. This guy's been killing it in online tournaments, but this is the first time that he's qualified for GSL after finishing his military service. So it's so exciting to be able to cast FanTaSy's games in the modern era because I just have so much hope here. So let's get into game number 1 between TY and FanTaSy.
Mountain Dew GSL Season 1 Regeneration 게임이 시작됩니다. 알렉산더. 게임 준비 완료.
Get your boats ready.
That's right. I forgot all of my nautical memes that I prepared to watch this guy.
TY.
There we go. Play. I was honestly expecting to see some form of cheese because I feel like it's different between StarCraft 1 and 2 when you think you're the better player.
Player 1. FanTaSy.
Like FanTaSy has been for most of his career in StarCraft 1. In StarCraft 1, I feel like a lot of times if you were the better player, you just played the long game. But in StarCraft 2, I think it's actually you can control your units so well that a lot of times I just see the double quotes better player go for the aggressive style and force his opponent to make a mistake early on.
It's an interesting way to look at it. We actually had a small conversation, Nick and I, about this recently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, like a lot of the times if you think you're a lot better in StarCraft 1, at least the Korean scene, they would attack early.
Oh, really?
And try to force their opponents to make those mistakes, and they're multitasking, they're micro
Well,
and things.
it's just so easy to die in StarCraft 1.
But you're definitely right, though. Like, the longer the game goes, the more you can kind of get ahead, so that's always been the foreigner mentality. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. But, both these guys were very good StarCraft 1 pro gamers. TY, of course, was known as Baby because he was, like, basically the youngest pro that we ever had in StarCraft 1. But he didn't quite make it by the time StarCraft 2 came out. And as you said, StarCraft 2 is where he really picked up his steam and is absolutely one of the best Terrans in the world. Whereas FanTaSy, if StarCraft 1 kept going on, maybe he could have been up there with Flash.
Oh,
we don't know.
100%. I mean, his nickname was the Crown Prince because he was supposed to be the guy who was coming up to be that way.
Yeah, and I guess the reason for a Crown Prince would probably be because he was on SK Telecom. And SKT1, as it's called, that was the Terran team, right? It had Boxer, who then kind of mentored I Love Uv, although he didn't really teach him. I Love Uv.
Well, it's hard to teach somebody that knows everything already.
Yeah, that's another story altogether about how good that guy is. Oh, very nice micro here so far by TY, really deflecting that easily. But yeah, so basically we had Bonjour Boxer, followed by Bonjour I Love Uv. Bonjour, of course, meaning the greatest player of an era.
Yeah, transcendent.
And a true mentor to FanTaSy, I Love Uv, helping him with builds and teaching him as he was the coach. This was the Crown Prince. This guy, and he's won Star Leagues and he's been to finals, and he's an absolutely fantastic player.
Yeah.
But StarCraft 1 kind of ended, and he went to StarCraft 2 and then the military, and here he is back in StarCraft 2, ready to make his mark once again.
Yep. At the end of his career in Brood War, he was the only Terran player to have ever had a higher Kespa rank than Flash after his prime. So just an absolutely sick player. Let's actually get into the StarCraft 2 time, even though I could just talk about FanTaSy StarCraft 1 for a long time.
Well, there's so much to talk about with these guys. They're such storied pros. But we see right now that FanTaSy is really keeping a lot of pressure on. We've been watching these little micro attacks he's had. Of course, TY has defended beautifully. So no real damage done as of yet.
I feel like I watch a lot of very skilled players sort of stress test newer opponents or opponents who are coming back, because there are a lot of ways that you can get those tiny advantages to build up. And so a lot of the ways that you do that is by playing aggressive, but it's actually FanTaSy that's been the one putting on all the pressure. But TY, of course, has expertly, deftly kind of just batted everything away every single time. So really, no huge advantage has kind of cropped up just yet. And we have both players on 2 bases, and aside from this push right now, this is kind of the first thing that should start to be a little bit scary here.
Well, with that siege tank, definitely. Ooh, drops it into siege range. A terrible mistake.
Ooh, and away we go.
Wow, that TY siege tank just ruined FanTaSy's push so hard. To lose your first tank when you're doing a 2-base aggressive build is not good news, to say the least. Especially when TY already has his third command center up.
There's that Simpsons gif of the grandfather walking in the door, hanging up his hat, picking up his hat, and walking right back out the door. That's what that push did. You come in, and then you leave. So He's like the worst grasshopper. He comes, but he doesn't eat. He just leaves immediately.
Yeah, okay.
There's my Bug's Life metaphor for the day.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware that was Bug's Life.
Yeah, they come, they eat, they leave.
I know The Simpsons, though.
Oh, okay. I got you there.
All right.
I have memes for all ages, Artosis.
Yeah. What about that meme with the guy who has his girlfriend and then, like, there's the other girl he's looking at?
That's actually an image macro. It's the more easily accessible but less ambitious form of expression. So I'll come up with one of those later.
I was going to say that the girlfriend was doing damage with that, and the other girl was losing your tank and going home.
Whoa, he's going to get pushed back again.
Yeah.
Is there anything TY can't do?
The disable into the killing with the cyclone.
It's like
beautifully
if one
done.
wasn't good enough, he's got to get you with the and one. Ugh.
Oh, well, a second factory coming up for TY right now. He is going to be going into mech-based play, but doing a small push at the moment, moving out. FanTaSy has just, all of his aggression has fell on deaf ears at this point.
Yeah.
He's getting his third command center, sure, but nothing has truly gone right for him.
I feel like TY was kind of given the answers to this test before he started taking it. He just knows exactly how to defend everything perfectly. But you know, FanTaSy has had a couple of missteps dropping that tank at the same time. So let's see what the next step is. Third base already up, kind of coming down for TY. And FanTaSy, I guess he's got the command center built inside his base, but he hasn't floated it out yet.
Yeah, it's turning into an orbital in just a second here. He's finishing it up. But yeah, it's going to be bio against mech, and the fact that TY has his third command center finished by the time that the thirds get started from FanTaSy, and the fact that FanTaSy hasn't done any damage yet, Stim is not even halfway done. This is very, very, very TY favored at the moment.
For sure. He's got more of everything in every way. More resources coming in, workers, army, map position. I think also when you talk about like tech, the tech is the huge spike, of course, once 1-1 and Stim are done is just, it's so crazy. So I really hope that FanTaSy holds on here, because we could actually just see him straight up die to the first push. Although I'm glad that TY is kind of exercising some restraint here.
He's being careful. He's just kind of like pressuring, moving out, and then moving back. And I mean, I always think that this is a very, very good way to play. Get your macro actually rolling. He's probably not exactly sure when Stim finishes, but that's when you really do have to be careful here as well as the mech player.
For sure. I mean, siege tanks are great, but like Stim Marines can kill just about everything. So let's see what the next move is going to be. There's obviously mech upgrades just now started, and I don't know, what do you think about this? I don't get a chance to often see kind of the contrasting styles like this, mech versus bio, at least not on the modern day map. So what is your thought on these paths our players have set themselves on?
Well, you know, I think that you can obviously play either style. FanTaSy, in my opinion, will be not going mech really at all. If he goes mech, it would probably be like against Zerg or Protoss more than Terran. I think that the medevacs really suit his style as a player. And you know, that was always my guess. We've tasked our translator Brian on figuring out why FanTaSy chose StarCraft 2 over Brood War, because as far as I know, no one in the foreign scene knows, at least. But his style is one of harassment for the most part. It always was back in Brood War. He's very good at multitasking and pulling attention around and punishing you for it. So I forget what your question is.
Well, that's because it's such a good one.
That's my real answer. Is I actually forget what you asked, but I'm glad that I kind of filled in what FanTaSy style is.
What I do is I just sow seeds of questions in Artosis' head and just let him keep talking until one of them gets answered.
Yeah.
And then I just pick back up again, and there we go. But I think ultimately my question was about kind of contrasting styles here. I'm not super familiar with FanTaSy's kind of double quote style since he's come back, because obviously there have been a lot of changes within StarCraft 2 even since he's returned. Another disable there on the Raven, and once again, TY just waxing off anything that FanTaSy tries to accomplish and pushing in here with an attack that could just roll him over.
It looks like a smashing attack, that's for sure. The siege tanks run away and do get a siege up on the high ground. In the meantime, FanTaSy with a counter drop. You can't really underestimate this. Goes after those siege tanks. I think that's a pretty smart move, or else he'll get cleaned up too easily.
Yeah, and FanTaSy has held off TY's push in the natural. They're both going to lose their naturals, but I think TY is doing a little bit more damage.
Yeah, I feel like TY is in a better spot from this, but it's a good idea from FanTaSy to try to get some counter damage done. Now, he's going to go after these armories, but 1-1 did end up finishing. So Sure, you delayed 2-2, but since it just started, it's not as powerful as this move could be otherwise.
And because there's air superiority for TY, I don't think there's a world in which FanTaSy gets out of here.
No.
Yeah, he's going to lose everything. So a perfect timing there for TY to pull back. He did damage. Sure, he took a little bit of damage, but he's going to right the ship and survive, having taken much less 50 supply up.
Yeah, definitely looking very good for TY with the higher worker count, the higher army size, but a lot of siege tanks for FanTaSy lived, and that's really important here. If he can get them into a strong position, that's hard to break.
As long as he doesn't drop them back within range of other siege tank fire again here. But look at TY, he's trying to break it. He's doing a little bit of a bulldog of his own, trying to drop on top of the siege tanks and push them back. And so he secures his third base, and he has 3 bases up and running after devastating FanTaSy's natural expansion. So FanTaSy's still reeling a little bit, even though he's trying to get out there on the map and make something happen.
Yeah, look at this, TY just with so much power, dropping a few Hellbats on top of those siege tanks. Was this a little bit of an overextension, though? We see that bio on the side cleaning up some tanks. It looks like he does end up winning this battle. If FanTaSy just had a little bit more there, though, he might have been able to break through.
Well, I tell you, one of the things that Terran drops can do is get you back in the game, but when TY has such air superiority, the medevacs never wind up escaping the fight. So it's not like there's this consistent, army of medevacs that survives, because they all die to these, 9 Vikings in the air? It's something crazy like that.
Yeah, yeah, you're quite right. And the thing is, if the mech player lives too long, you generally can't stay on bio forever. And one of the good switches you can do is into a Sky Terran composition to kind of deal with that. We don't see that from FanTaSy. It seems like he is more prescribed to the siege tank bio, which actually works well as well, because it's hard to attack into siege tanks, and then you have your bio for additional mobility. So that's the type of style that he's using right here. Now, it's not really paying off yet. He's not been able to do very much damage at all to TY aside from the 1 counter drop, and he's taken a lot himself this game.
For sure. But the one takeaway for me is that FanTaSy is being super proactive. All that harassment early on, trying to run little groups of bio in here and there. Now, granted, it didn't work, but he's getting out there. And TY is just so godlike that he has been able to really defend it every turn. So what is FanTaSy's plan right here? He's got a group of bio in the middle of the map, so I don't know if he wants to go for a counter or try to wrap around for a flank. And it looks like he's going for a counter, but man, that's a very well-defended base.
Yeah, there's not any real opportunity for him to do damage here, and he's lost a lot of SCVs during this. There's been some good Liberator harassment. It's just a matter of time before FanTaSy has to GG, but y'all may have heard of this thing called FanTaSy GG time.
Oh, tell me no more, but yeah, FanTaSy GG is where you stay in the game right before you lose your last building.
Yeah.
Then you type out. It's not bad manner. The idea is that FanTaSy explained in an interview is that if you always stay in the game as long as possible, then if in that one game you have a hidden base, your opponent won't think that you do and will underestimate you there. But this is a little bit of an earlier exit as TY takes game number 1.
That's actually kind of a fair statement. Don't leave games too early for reasons like that.
I mean, you got to trust the pro player judgment. When they know they're done, it's like time to go.
Well, someone who's won championships like him and really truly is one of the greatest of all time, yeah, if he says something, you can write that down in your notebook.
For sure. And even though we talk about FanTaSy as being a player who's, achieved a lot in the previous version of StarCraft and maybe isn't quite up to the level of the tip-top players nowadays, he's still absolutely one of the best players in the world. He qualified to GSL as one of the 32 best players in South Korea, and that really puts you on a very high pedestal.
Oh yeah, he's in good shape right now. He's been doing very well in a lot of the online cups. He's been crushing really strong opponents in things like Arena Leagues, WSG quals. He's been playing everything, right? Yeah. I haven't really gotten to see very much of his play yet, and it didn't look bad there. It's just that TY is probably the best TDT player in the world. Someone's like, hey, what about Maru? Okay, Maru should have lost Game 7 to TY in that GSL Finals, and we all know that. So
Maru did lose Game 7 to TY in the WESG that TY won, which was his first tournament after 11 years of playing. So, yeah, very iconic victory there. Let's get into game number 2 and see if FanTaSy can turn it around.
마운틴 듀 GSL 시즌 1 리제너레이션 게임이 시작됩니다.
Oh, Artosis.
Indeed.
게임 준비 완료.
Oh, Artosis indeed. So, double proxy barracks Reaper seems to be what TY is going to be going for here.
Yeah, and I kind of expected this at some point, kind of like I started out saying in the last game. I want to see TY really put the pressure on. FanTaSy actually played a very aggressive kind of style, consistently harassing early, but TY just wasn't having any of it and totally repelled it.
Yeah, you know, I think that, again, that is how FanTaSy really always played. He was very harassment-based, and I think that might be part of the reason why he chose StarCraft 2 anyways, because Terran in StarCraft 2 is more harassment-based than Terran in StarCraft 1.
Oh, yeah.
Terran in StarCraft 1 is a very mechanical race, and that's not actually what he excels at, even though he's one of the best of all time. It's a very weird thing. His style was just so different from everyone else's in StarCraft 1. But, yeah, I feel like it fits well into this. But, again, TY is just like the ultimate Terran versus Terran player, in my opinion.
I mean, he's the ultimate just about everything. It's hard to imagine a world in which FanTaSy is ready for this one. I don't think he has any idea just yet. I mean, as soon as he gets across the map and scouts, that's when you know it's coming. But I think it'll just be too late there.
Well, he's making a Reaper. If the Reaper leaves the base of FanTaSy and he starts an add-on, that is getting pretty close to the point of no return. TY actually kind of invented the two barracks proxy Reaper strategy, which is to make 2 Reapers right off the bat. Let's see if he starts a second.
One of the reasons
he does.
Okay, yeah.
That's important.
Yeah. One of the reasons he had to invent that style is because Beyond kept wrecking him with proxy Reaper over and over and over again. So he got pretty good at that. But here we go. FanTaSy is going to see that the jig, as they say, is up. It's time to do or die. Can you hold on against critical mass of Reapers in your base? They're already going to start to lose SCVs.
Okay, so here comes the other Reaper. We'll see how he does his grenades. He's got to kind of wait for the other Reaper as well. Obviously, he does not want this bunker to finish. That would make it very tough. That's a safe place to heal up and everything. Okay, the third Reaper coming in now, trying to push everything back.
He didn't start rebuilding the bunker. There we go. Get it started up.
Okay, so it does take a while for a bunker to finish. Oh my gosh.
I think he's going to get it up.
It's such a nice place to run back to, because a lot of times what you do is force the Reapers down, and then they can't see the high ground, so the jump up is where you get a lot of damage. Here they can go in there and repair at any time.
Yeah, extra range from the bunker and just like...
You see that proxy Stargate? I love this as a counter to this. This is actually another thing that TY started doing a lot against these double barracks proxies, is you go for a Liberator, because they have nothing at home to stop it.
Oh yeah. And as soon as they can't mine anymore, you just really kind of flip the table. So, and FanTaSy is actually doing a remarkably good job, like not just totally rolling over at home. He's getting up the Hellions that he needs to be able to kind of contain the Reapers once they get out of that bunker. And I just really want to see what the reaction is here. He's getting a tech lab on that proxy.
Yeah. Well, I think because he stopped microing it, at this point there's a critical mass for FanTaSy where you can't harass much anymore.
Okay.
Like you can do a little bit. He's trying to get that add-on, but you just need like a tank or a Cyclone or something here to deal with the bunker. You can't attack the bunker with Hellions.
Yeah, no way you can do that. He's going to lose the add-on there, so that's going to make the factory a little bit less desirable. Only Hellions.
He already queued up his Cyclone. He was actually supply blocked, but he had it queued,
okay,
so
that's what it was.
It's actually fine. He'll end up killing this this bunker over time. There'll be a funny little micro thing that occurs, though. What we should see from TY is having only 3 Reapers in the bunker, and then he can like repair, and if it targets that, he can load it in. I feel like that will do a good job against a Cyclone.
Oh, is he going to scout this with the barracks? How is TY so good? Oh, he's going to get out of the bunker, try to get a little bit of extra damage done. He's zoning mines, which they're so sexy. He's going to scout the proxy Banshee. He's going to see even the cloaks on the way. And I agree with what you were saying earlier, Artos. I feel like a Liberator just would have been the best way to go, because this is taking so long to hit as a counter.
Yeah, like I quite like the Liberator as the counter, because you just siege it up over the command center, and they don't really have much to hit it. Now, yeah, if he, like, for instance, loses that right before Cloak finishes, obviously Banshees with Cloak can kill a hell of a lot of SCVs.
Oh my god, no. Oh!
That is a heartbreaker.
Denied is right.
Oh, man.
Man, I feel like FanTaSy is just so close to kind of having a lot of the answers he needs to take wins here. But, I mean, that only gets you so far, right?
Yeah.
It only counts, as they say, in horseshoes, Artosis.
Horseshoes and hand grenades, as they say.
Well, it depends on your hand grenade, right? I mean, what if it's like...
If it's close, then it works.
What if it's like my baby's first hand grenade, you know? That's not going to do that much, Artosis.
What?
You got to start them young, man. I don't know. What if it's like a dud, right? You throw it close, but it doesn't go off.
Dude, have you ever actually held a hand grenade?
I have held a hand grenade.
They are so heavy.
They are both heavy and terrifying, even if they're inert.
Yeah. It would hurt to get hit by one of those no matter what.
Right, especially if it actually just hits you. Then it actually counts if you get pretty close with it. But anyway, the end result of all of this is that FanTaSy has come so close and yet so far. And even though he's finally busted out across the map, I mean, TY has just really had a masterclass, both putting on the pressure and defending whenever FanTaSy comes calling.
Now, those two Cyclones are going to make the Banshee having a very hard time. All right, use that scan. I think that was just for a lock-on to try to get the Banshee, but can't quite do it there.
Okay, he doesn't have Cloak to break the lock-on, so he just has to run away.
Yeah.
And now it's actually comical because it's going to be TY's Banshee that deals critical damage on the other side.
You are quite right about that. If Banshee gets over there right now, this is the situation where FanTaSy has to get damage done. Oh, no. And he just finished a Siege Tank, so there's like nothing coming that can stop this.
I wish you guys could be in the studio and see FanTaSy's face right now. If you're here in person, you get that bonus zone because it is a look of a little bit of frustration there.
Ooh, he lost that Banshee with one hit left on the Cyclone as well. Everything just not quite working.
He's chasing it down. Is he going to get it? Yes. All right. A moral victory, but another defeat in the end. TY 2-0 over FanTaSy.
He smashed there. I do not feel like FanTaSy played poorly. I don't think he's nervous. I think he's playing some good StarCraft, but TY is a god of TBT. And that was obviously a hard one there for FanTaSy, but
I mean,
I'm excited to see his other matches.
There's this trend of videos on YouTube called Smash or Pass there, and TY definitely chose the Smash option. Nothing FanTaSy ever did really worked out. TY just such a god. And I think the story I really want to tell here is the generational gap. TY grew up watching FanTaSy, and now he's taking him out 2-0. We're going to take a quick break and come back with Impact versus Leenock.